So there's this old guy. Well, he used to be. I'm pretty sure he must have died by now because he looked like he was on death's doorstep last time I saw him. That was quite a few years ago. But he taught me how to play clawhammer banjo. And I had been trying to learn how to play the banjo for 25 years. And I had gone on to Georgia Public TV with a $15 banjo, attempting to learn so I could help somebody else learn. And I watched Buddy Blackman, who was in college back in those days at the University of Georgia, and they made a public TV show about how to play five-string banjo. And that was Scruggs style, and I spent 25 years trying to play Scruggs style without ever being able to get up to speed. And if you've ever tried to play a banjo, most Scruggs style players want to play fast, and if you can't play fast, it just don't sound like much. And they play, I think they call it chromatic banjo, which means they put every dingly dangly note in there. If you listen to a banjo, there's so many notes coming at you all at once that they blend together and make somewhat of a harmonic melody. But if it's not played, if it's not played up to speed, then you don't get much out of it listening wise. Well, I couldn't do that. I didn't have fingers for it. I wrecked my hands. Probably driving a truck was mostly what did it, but then I went to work in a leather tannery up in Maine, and up there they had these drying racks, and it was piecework. You got paid for how many you could do, and I was working across the rack with this crazy mother, and I couldn't go fast enough to suit him, and I just tore my hands up on those racks. We had these little metal clips. We had to stretch out skins and clip them down on those hot metal racks. Anyway, they just ruined my hands. So anyway, I was out. Some young lady that I knew said, "Come over. I want to show you something." And her husband had a banjo, and I was looking for a little small lightweight banjo, something I could throw in the car and wouldn't have to worry about damaging, And she said, "I'm gonna give you this," and I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I'll pay it. No, I want to give it to you." So she gave me this banjo, and I looked in the back, and there was a name in there that said Fairbanks. And I didn't know what Fairbanks was in a banjo, and didn't look. This little thing didn't look like much. But it's nice. It's well made. Had skin head, and all that. So anyway, at about that time, I was single then, and didn't have a place to stay, and I was renting a attic of a house from George, and I knew George was interested in playing banjos because I'd heard him talk about it a little bit. So I called George up and I said, "I got a banjo here, and I don't know what it is, and it's got Fairbanks written in the back of it." And he said, "Come over here quick." So I went over there. He looked at it, and he looked at it, he looked at it, and he looked at it. He said to me, because I had brought over my finger picks because I was trying to play it. He said, "Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to throw away them freaking finger picks." He said, "You don't play a banjo like this with finger picks." And I said, "Well, how do you play it?" And he showed me. He showed me how to do on a claw hammer. You do a downstroke with the back of one of your fingernails, and then you let your thumb rest on the fifth string, and you do on the up string. You do a little pop on the string, and that makes a dumb bum diddy kind of noise. Is how they teach you how to play. So he got me started on that, and by golly, it didn't take long for me to get where I could play a tune and I could play some songs, and I was going along real good there. Well, he collected banjos. In fact, he would buy vintage banjos and have them remade to his liking. I mean, he had Vegas and Bacon and Days and Fairbanks and Cole. He had all those big name banjos. He had some Stewart, was it SS Stewarts? Just had Lyon and Healy and Washburn, but he had this one banjo that was unlike any other, and it wasn't even really that banjo, but it was a banjo. Well, let me take that back. Maybe it was, because he had bought a tone ring out of one of these, and what it was a Strongberg cupophone, and a cupophone had a brass ring, nickel-plated brass ring with bells, little round bells in it, and each bell had a hole drilled in the side of it facing inward, and that sit on a little shelf inside the ring, and that was called Stromberg made the banjos, and it was called a Stromberg cupophone, or some people call them cupperphones, cup A phone, cup O phone, but it's a cupophone. And he had found in a yard sale a cupophone tone ring and put it in the back of a Vega tubaphone. And let me tell you, he strummed and hit a few notes, and I had never heard anything in my life sounded as good as that banjo. But that was his special made banjo, and he had had the neck made for it, and he'd had the pot redone and all that stuff. And I remember he drove a sheetrock screw in the back of the banjo to hold that cupophone tone ring in there, which is completely sacrilegious. You go driving sheetrock screws into a Vega tubaphone, which is worth at least $1,500 up to $4,000 or $5,000. I mean, just George did what he wanted to do. So anyway, he had this one banjo that it was a real cupophone, Stromberg, and he had a neck made for it. And that's what George did. He sent banjos off to famous neck makers of the day and had them build him a neck. And he would design the inlay on it, and these guys would get his banjo and they would use, you call it mother of pearl, but basically, let me see if I'm saying this right. I think mother of pearl is basically the insides of seashells. If you ever looked at a seashell and saw that pretty shiny stuff inside, well, they used that to make these inlays out of back in the day. Seemed like they used something else too, but that's the thing that comes to mind the most. So he had this one, and he had the neck made, and he was like me. He didn't like a long neck, so it was a little shorter than normal. And it was a perfect banjo, and I bought that from him. He sold it to me because it was such an honor to get to own one of George's banjos. And I should tell you a little bit about George. George was an outlaw. He would not let me take a picture of him. He would not let me make a video of him playing. He didn't want anybody in the world to see him. I believe he was a smuggler. When we were young, we was raised during a time when certain herbs and spices that came from countries down in the southern part, down below Florida and all that, well, people was experimenting with them herbs and spices and having really unique and interesting interactions with themselves and each other. And I firmly believe that probably George was a smuggler, and that's why he didn't want his picture to get out there, because he didn't want people to know about him. And you notice I ain't mentioned his last name, and I'm not going to, because who knows? Of course, even though he's probably dead, I really wish he'd let me get a video of him, because he could play. He used to fiberglass the backs of his fingernails in order to get a better tone quality out of his downstroke and his thumbnail. I mean, he played slow. He didn't play like, if you listen to banjo on the Grand Ole Opry, these guys, back in those days especially, now they're getting away. People are starting to play more clawhammer and drop thumb and interesting stuff like that, interesting licks. But back in the day, everything was just Scruggs style Nashville banjo, and it was just fast as you can go, and and he didn't play that way. He played slow, where each note rang out clearly like a bell on those old banjos that he put together out of pieces of other banjos, and it was just amazing to go over his house. You never knew what he was going to pull out from under the bed. He had all these banjos, So anyway, at a certain point, he let me buy from him that cupophone banjo with that neck that he made. And I loved it, except that he made it with a fat neck, and I've got these little skinny, short-fingered hands that are damaged. I ruined my hands working, I think I mentioned that, in the leather tannery and driving the truck. And I had the carpal tunnel surgery on both of them. My hands still ain't very good. My fingers still lock up on me and all kind of stuff. So I kept that banjo for quite a while, and then there was a young feller I met, and he had just gotten out of the Navy, and he had seen me on YouTube, and he came to visit, and we sat around, and I guess I taught him to play the banjo, because he sat around the house there, and we played a few licks, and he went back home, and man, in no time flat, he was just tearing the banjo up, and I was pretty amazed at him. He's a skinny little feller. You wouldn't think much of him. Well, by golly, this guy, I think, became a fireman. And then he took up weightlifting, and now he is an amazing weightlifter. I saw him put up something the other day about he had just lifted 700 pounds. I mean, that's what kind of amazing weightlifter he became. But that's getting away. What that does, it shows you the quality of some of the people that I've had as friends during my lifetime. And he's still alive. I just shot him an email, a Facebook message this morning to tell him what I did. But I asked George if it was okay if I sold that banjo, and then for the same price that I paid for it, I told him who I was going to sell it to, because I had brought this fella up and let him meet George, so he knew George, you know. So I sold him that banjo, and then years later he asked me if I wanted it back. He said he's thinking about selling it, and I said I don't really. So he said, you mind if I sell it to somebody else? And I didn't. So he sold it to somebody else. So since then, every so often, you know, I'll happen over on the eBay and I'll look for a Fairbanks banjo, or a Fairbanks and Cole, or a Cole, or a you know, Stromberg or SS Stewart. I almost never see. Well, I see Strombergs. There's a lot of Stromberg Bosonets out there, which is, in my opinion, it's not a very fancy banjo. There ain't much to it. But I almost never see a cupophone. Now, there was this guy, his name was Vince Martello, something like that. There's a YouTuber that goes by that name, but it's not the same guy. But he used to collect all these old Strombergs. He'd buy them up every time. Every time one came for sale, he'd buy it before I had a chance to. But during the last year, or year and a half, or 2 or 3 years, I ain't even seen a cupophone for sale anywhere. I mean, it's like, man, you just don't even see them anymore. Well, this morning, I was messing around on the internet, and something popped up, you know, on Reverb. That's a new thing that I'd never heard of before, but it's a place where people sell their musical instruments now through Reverb, and it's kind of like, you know, there's a couple of companies in New York that sell musical instruments, and they're kind of amazing. I bought a few instruments from them. You can really get some great deals there. But Reverb is kind of like an online sale, and it's not an auction, it's a sale where you can buy and sell musical instruments. And they had, I was looking through there, and I thought, I'll just do a little search. And I typed in cupophone, didn't find anything, typed in Stromberg, and one popped up. And it was a Stromberg cupophone, although on the name tag it's got the original neck and the original nameplate on the back, and it doesn't say cupophone. And it may be that they made one that was called a cupophone and one that wasn't called that, but still had the same bell ringtone, sound tone in the back of it. But there was one on there, and it had a beautiful neck, and it was listed as a tenor banjo, but it looked like a plectrum. And a lot of you don't know what that means, but a plectrum banjo has a longer neck than a tenor banjo. And of course, a 5-string banjo is longer than any of them, at least nowadays it is. In fact, 26 inches from nut to fret bar is considered standard nowadays, and every banjo you see, every new banjo you see anywhere is going to have 26 and a half inch neck. That's from nut to bridge down here. 26 and a half inch string. But a plectrum will be like maybe 24, a little shorter. A tenor will be like 18, a little short, it's even shorter. And if you try to convert a tenor banjo to a 5-string, you lose the sound quality in the 3rd string because there's not enough distance for that string to vibrate at the right speed. And so they make bridges that are recessed on the 3rd string so that vibration will have a little bit more room to work. But a plectrum banjo is an ideal banjo to put a 5th-string shelf on and play it as a 5-string, especially for me because my arms get sore. And if I'm reaching way up here to play, it's really hard for me to do that very long. Well, it turns out this banjo that was for sale this morning had a cupophone tone ring. It looks like it's a beautiful banjo. It's got some beautiful, wonderful looking inlay on the neck. It's got the Stromberg plate on the dowel stick. It looks like it's all original. It may not be. It may have been redone. I don't know. But it was for sale for the same price that I sold George's banjo to Josh. His name's Josh, and his name's Josh Rondo. I don't think he's on YouTube, but I'm sure he's out there because, you know, like I say, he's probably a famous weightlifter by now. So anyway, that's a lot of money that I just spent, that I pulled out of what I have left for savings to get me through my old age. And you might say, well, why would you spend, a lot of money for something like a banjo? I mean, what good is it, and how's it going to help you survive into your old age? And I'm going to tell you another story now. We're going to transition from George and Josh to one of my ex-wives, and she had a husband. I can't remember his name. Might have been Dave. But everybody said he was just the sweetest guy. Well, he used to tell her, and then she in turn told me, that he used to say about money and about spending money, he used to say, you only get to spend it once. You can't spend it but once. And if I got all excited, I wanted to buy a hot rod car, she'd say, well, you can't spend it but once, which I guess meant that you better not spend your money on this Harley Davidson or this hot rod car, because you won't have it later when you need it for your old age or whatever, But the thing about Dave, or whatever his name was that he was dead. He died. He died early. He died young. He got some disease. Everybody loved him. He was a great guy. He got some disease, and he lingered a while, and then he passed away. And it was sad. It was awful. And everybody was sad about it. It occurred to me today, as I was looking at that banjo, what he said. He said, you can't spend it but once. And I thought, well, you can certainly spend it once if you want to, and then you get to enjoy having had it in the first place. I mean, if you save it forever until you're dead, and you hope that it's going to carry you into the land of glory and happiness and all that. My mom and my dad, they worked hard all their life. They pinched pennies they pinched nickels till the Indian on the back screamed. If they couldn't make it themselves, a lot of times they did without. And I learned how to fix cars mostly because they didn't have enough money to buy a new car part, and we'd have to figure out how to make the old ones work even after they were broke. Well, when I was grown, younger than I am, but grown, they had amassed what I would consider to be a fortune. And these are just two people that, all they ever did was worked in a factory, and then they retired. And, my dad used to buy up old motorboats, and they had done upholstery work, so they'd reupholster the seats, and they'd swap the boats and the trailers and motors around. They'd resell them, make a few bucks here and there. They'd buy an old house, they'd fix it up and sell it. They'd buy an old mobile home somewhere, and they'd clean it up, fix it up, paint it up, sell it, and make a little money with it. That was before house flipping was a thing. They were doing this. I'll tell you another thing they did. We had some land, and a lot of y'all fuss, about the interest rate. Well, when I was a kid, the interest rate was over 10% for years and years and years, so much so that we came to believe that the interest rate was always going to be over 10%. And we didn't even think about it ever going down because it hadn't gone down in so long. So what my dad did, he had bought 70 acres of land out in Douglasville, and there was a little lake out there. It wasn't a pond, it was a lake. And when he got the hankering, he had us boys about raised. They wanted the nice new house, nice new brick house and all that. So he split that land up. It's 70 acres, and he took 20 acres over here, and he sold it to somebody on payments. He said, you just pay me so much a month. And he had an amortization schedule, and at 10%, if you make payments on something, if you look at an amortization schedule, you're paying most of your money in interest. In fact, when you first make a payment, you might pay $1 toward the payment, and the rest of it all goes to interest. And as you pay that down, you begin to pay more and more and more on the property itself. But you have spent, you can borrow $10,000 and wind up paying back 30 or 40 by the time you pay interest on an amortization schedule. Making payments. Well, Mom and Dad figured that out. My dad, pretty smart cookie, and so what he did is he'd take 20 acres over here, sell it for 20 grand or something like that. I don't know, whatever. Land was not as expensive as it is now. And they'd make payments on it, and he had people that made payments for like 10 years, and then something came up and they really couldn't afford it anymore, and they'd say, I can't afford to keep making payments on the land. Would you just take it back? And he'd say, yeah, I'll take it back. So he'd take it back, turn around, sell it to somebody else, and they'd do the same thing. That happened 3 or 4 times. People would make payments never really pay very much of anything toward the property, but spend all that money on interest, and then Dad wound up getting the money back. And Dad took that money and put it in the bank, and he would use it to go buy another old house or another old piece of property and fix it up and sell it. Do the same thing, make payments on it, set it out over to a bank, just make payments. Well, I know there was a point I was headed toward with all this, but now I forgot. Oh, I know what it was. So Mom and Dad got olderish, and Dad worked down the factory most of his life, and he got industrial waste in his lungs. Apparently, he was an upholsterer, worked for Simmons Beauty Rest. They make beds and couches and stuff, and breathing in all that cloth material clogged his lungs up, where he wasn't able to breathe and get enough air to get oxygen into his brain. And he went to some doctor, and they run a vacuum cleaner down in his lungs, and I think that's what really did him in, because he said later that doctor refused to see him, and I think what that doctor did was probably not an approved therapy, because right after that he really went downhill quick. And my dad lost the ability to work because he couldn't breathe, which was awful, because he was like me. He liked to work. Nothing made him happier than to fix something and make things out of nothing. He'd gotten really good at making stuff out of nothing. But Dad died, and Mom was still around. Well, Mom went on pretty good there for a while. I was surprised. I didn't think she'd live past him, but she did. She did pretty well. And then one day she fell down. Of course, by now I was up in Maine. My brother was down around here somewhere. And they took her in, and doctor said she can't be on her own. She needs to be in a nursing home. It wasn't actually a nursing home. It was a care facility. So they put her in a care facility. Well, that was costing us about $2,800 a month. Now, this was quite a few years ago. They're even more expensive now, but that's a lot of money. And over time, that money sucked all the money they had in savings away. We sold a house that they had. All of that went toward that. We sold another house they had. All of that went toward that. And then when it came right down to it, there wasn't any more money anymore, and they took her and stuck her in one of these, what I'd call a nursing home, which basically you're in there, and they take your Medicaid or your Medicare or whatever. No, they take your Social Security and your Medicaid and your Medicare. Anyway, they take your money. So they died. Used to be a joke about, I remember Josh one time, I was living bad. Josh, my son, he said, they're going to cut you out of the will because they don't like the way you're living. I don't know if they said that to him or not. They probably did, and he said that to me. But anyway, there wasn't nothing in the will. There wasn't no money left. It all got sucked away. And Mom, by the time, before Mom died in that nursing home, she had lost her memory. She knew I was either me or my brother or possibly my dad. But my mom turned into the cutest little thing. She'd sit and around, she'd sing songs that she used to sing when she was a little girl, and she'd laugh. I'd never heard a lot of these songs. I wish I'd have nowadays you got a phone, you can whip it out and take a recording, and we didn't have that back then, but I wish I had recordings of Mom singing them songs. And I used to go down a little bit. I'd play a little banjo, I'd sing a little bit with her. Me and Mom, she used to play the organ when she was a kid, and we used to sing together once in a while when Dad wasn't around. But anyway, they saved all that money, and I don't know if it was worth it or not. I don't know if they needed it. I don't know. Maybe it made her more comfortable there toward the end, and I don't know. But it's just a shame that, and I know they enjoyed what they had, but I ain't never going to hang on to money and deny myself of something that could make me want to live longer. I'm a firm believer that you need to have something to look forward to. You need to have something that makes you want to get up out of bed and go out and do stuff, like this car, like that rat rod, like that Studebaker, like that boat. I believe as long as I have something that I need to get out of bed and go do, I'll keep going longer than I would if I was just sitting around watching golf on TV. I got a buddy who watches golf on TV. And the other day he was telling me about something he saw on a television channel that was showing the local town meetings, and I said, "You mean you gotten so bored you can't find anything to watch, and you're watching the local town meetings on television? Jeez Louise, Bill." Yeah, it was Bill. You need to get yourself a boat, Bill. You need to get yourself a car, Bill. You need to get yourself a camper, Bill. What I'm saying is, I spent the money. I ordered an amazing, rare, beautiful banjo. It's going to be here at some point. I'll pull it out and I'll play it, and I'll probably modify the neck. Now, it is sacrilegious to modify the neck on a very rare, very valuable Stromberg cup-a-phone banjo. And just like George, who drove that screw down in the neck of that tubaphone in order to put that cup-a-phone, Stromberg cup-a-phone tone ring in the back of it, I'm going to do it. You know why I'm going to do it? Because it's going to keep me alive. It's going to keep me living. It's going to keep me being excited about getting up every day and doing stuff. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep doing stuff to be excited about and to keep me alive for as long as I can, because I love every day of living. I talk to the good Lord. I get up in the morning and I say, Lord, thank you. I'm still alive. I didn't think I'd make it this long. I really didn't. I thought I'd be dead. I thought I'd be dead before I got old enough to go fight in the Vietnam War. When I was a kid, we had grown up on all these war movies. We'd watched Audie Murphy. He's just a little thing, but he was a big war hero. He came home, started making movies. We watched Jimmy Stewart, we watched John Wayne. All these guys were making these war movies, and they was heroes, and I wanted to grow up and be just like them. I wanted to go to war. I wanted to get my chance to fight. I wanted to be a part of that. It was only after I got a little older before I realized that, hey, getting shipped over to Vietnam where they got snakes that'll bite you and mosquitoes that'll sting you and people over there that'll pop up out of a rice paddy and shoot at you and are hot and sweaty and uncomfortable and malaria and all that stuff. But, back when I was a kid, war was just a lot more fun because we just watched it on TV and it was cool. It wasn't the same. But anyway, I think I started this to say I'm going to spend the money. I did spend the money. I have already spent the money. Now I got to go to the bank and pull some money out of that savings account and send it off to this banjo guy. But you know what? It's going to keep me alive. My wife said to me a while back, she said, do you really need another fill in the blank? Now it could be car, could be boat, could be, anything, any of these things that I work on. And I think I said something like, I could be out here working on this and enjoying my life and having something to live for, or I could be in there sitting on the couch wasting away. And she kind of looked at me a little bit, and I saw the wheels go around her head like she was reasoning it out, and she looked back at me and she kind of gave me a little nod that said, yeah, I get it. You keep doing what you need to do to be happy. You do that, man. You stay alive. You enjoy your life. Make it work. Make it work for you. Enjoy it. With my blessing. So I'm about to crawl under this Rambler. I won't take you with me because it ain't that much fun under there for two people, especially when one of them's inside of a camera. But I just want to say that before it slipped out of my mind. I just want to tell you about George and Josh and Banjo and Mom and Dad. And I didn't know if I was going to go into all of that, but I just did. So thanks for watching. I appreciate every one of you. I had somebody, it was a banjo. There's a banjo site on Facebook, and I think it's called Crappy Banjo Player. This is a Facebook page for crappy banjo players, and I thought, holy cow, they made a banjo page for me, and I jumped on there, and I put up a couple things, and I got banjo lessons on YouTube. I've got a whole playlist of clawhammer banjo lessons, and I posted it on there, and it said, you can go here to learn free how to play banjos badly. And this guy wrote back, he said, I heard you play a certain song 10 years ago, and that song got stuck in my head, and I still walk around humming it. And he told me what the song was, and I thought, that's darn nice of that fella, just, to get in touch and tell me that. And I just, sometimes it's things like that makes this YouTube stuff worthwhile. I ain't making no money no more. YouTube's done, I don't know what they're doing with the money that we used to get, but they sure ain't giving it to us anymore. And you can ask anybody that's making videos, they'll tell you about the same thing. But it never really was about the money. It's nice to have a little bit come in because it kind of helped pay for car parts, but the reality is this has always been for a relationship. I do this to have a relationship with people. I may not be all that outgoing when it comes to leaving the home place and going out and meeting people, but I don't mind talking to y'all on here because that's close enough. I can handle that far away enough, or you know what I mean. So anyway, I'm going to go underneath this Rambler. First I'm going to jack it up, and I'm going to get the bolts in the back of the motor. And I'm going to connect the flywheel to the torque converter. I'm going to find out what's making my transmission leak all this oil that I've been trying to clean up out here, and then we'll talk to you some more. Y'all have a nice day. I love every one of you, whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, just get over it. Or go watch somebody else. Go watch Waylon Wire. He needs all the help he can get these days. Or go watch George. He's building that goofy cart. That goofy cart is cool. There's another guy out there. I think I call him Zach because that's what he goes by on Facebook. But he's building one of those one of those cars with a bobtail. No, they call them something boat tail. Build a boat tail vintage cart. So, see you later. Happy trails. Goodbye.